Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions like, can we create new senses for humans? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Ashley Litton was helping her husband set up a business Venmo account when she discovered a terrible secret.
I saw a hidden folder, and I opened it. What the hell did I do?
Listen to Season 2 of Betrayal on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Stuff You Should Know, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Josh, and Chuck's here too, and Jerry's here too, and this is Stuff You Should Know about the history of exercising. Yeah.
I found this super fascinating.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating.
I don't know why. It just grabbed me, and I guess it grabbed me earlier because it was my idea, because I don't know, maybe I'd seen Anchorman and they made the jogging joke. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered hearing that, exercise is sort of new.
Right.
If you look at not only the history of humans, but the history of America. It's only been around for, 50-ish years, 60 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, in ancient times, they were pretty into fitness, but then it kind of dropped off for a couple thousand years, and we picked it up again in 1960, roughly, at the very least, the decade of the 60s. And like you said, specifically in America, in the United States, I should say.
Yeah. So should we do it?
Yeah. The whole thing is that the first half of the 20th century, it's not like there weren't people exercising, right? They were out there. They were just considered weirdos or possibly gay.
Exactly. They didn't even really use the word exercise much. It was called physical culture. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it was a real niche thing. There were sports and athletes and people like that were doing physical training, and the military did stuff like that.
Right.
And there was bodybuilding, but that was super niche too. But as far as like your regular average American walking around, they were just walking around or sitting in chairs.
They were walking around eating a steak while they walked around. That's what they were doing.
With the martini. And you did mention, possibly gay. And that was a characteristic early on, is like, if you are a man and it's 1940 something or 50 something, and you want to have like a nice body and you want muscles, people might say, well, you're probably gay or you're probably a narcissist, because gyms are for gay men to meet each other. Mm-hmm. And that was just sort of the perception at the time. Exactly.
And then women didn't have it much better. They were almost culturally forbidden from exercising. In the first place, it was unladylike to engage in exercise, or typically considered that. On top of that, exercise is, you're exercising for yourself. It's kind of the basis of exercise. And that also seemed unseemly for women to engage in such a self-indulgent pursuit, right? Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, there was a general idea that your uterus might fall out if you exercise too vigorously.
Yeah, or just, you may not be able to get pregnant if you exercise, so just don't do that. Just stay on your feet all day and do the housework.
Right, exactly. Which, as we'll see, is actually an example of moderate physical activity.
That's right. It's better than sitting down.
So in about 1960, if you asked Americans, hey, do you exercise regularly? I'm surprised at this. About a quarter of Americans would have said yes.
That seemed high.
It does. It seems high to me, too. In 1987, less than 30 years later, the answer to that question was yes from almost 70% of people. So in those 3 decades, from 1960 till the 80s, through the 80s, exercise came on the scene and just gelled with the world and in the United States in particular.
Yeah, I would be curious to see that poll and see exactly how it was worded and defined.
Right.
Because that 24% seems high, and I could see people just being like, well, sure, I cut the lawn.
Right.
that kind of thing.
And regularly was once within the last 3 years.
Yeah, you cut the lawn once every 3 years.
Right. So again, it wasn't just women who were considered at risk health-wise from exercise. Everybody was considered at risk. If you exercise too much, you were probably overtaxing your heart, and you're probably going to die young. They actually thought athletes were at risk of dying young from overexerting themselves. And then it was finally, I think, about in the late 40s when a British epidemiologist named Jeremy N. Morris, and that N in the Morris makes me want to say Norris so bad.
Me too.
It's a weird combination. But he said, you know what? I like to jog and I like to exercise, and I think that this is wrong. So I'm going to go about studying it in the most clever way possible.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting study. And by the way, Livia put this together for us, and as usual, I think she crushed it.
Knocked it out of the park.
I had no notes. Not that we're usually notey.
No.
But you know what I mean?
No, we're not very notey, I like to think.
Just a gold star.
Right.
But yeah, he had a really ingenious and sort of contained way to study this. He did lots of other studies, but one of the ways he did it was he said, we got these big double-decker buses in England.
Everybody's seen those.
Everyone's seen those. And there's two people who work on those. There's the guy who drives them, and then there's the guy who is the bus conductor, and he's always huffing it up and down those stairs. And, granted, it's not like 40 stairs or anything, but they're steep, and you're climbing those things all day long back and forth.
Right.
So he was like, I got a nice little captive audience of people who are pretty similar probably in lifestyle and in age and stuff like that. And one of them exercises and one of them doesn't. And he found that drivers had more than twice as many heart attacks as conductors. And he was like, wait a minute, did some more studying and said, hey, everybody, I think exercising is good for your heart.
Yeah. And other people were like, wait a minute, let us check it out. Well, why? It's true. Study after study started coming in saying, like, not only does exercise not put you in an early grave, it actually probably prevents you from an early grave. So maybe we should all start exercising. So in the 50s, this was the era of proving that exercise was good for you. And then by the time the 60s rolled around, people were ready to start getting into it. And at first, it seems like they were more hardcore, surprisingly enough, at first than we are today. Because you look around and like so many people exercise today, especially in comparison to like the 60s and 70s at the beginning of the boom. But people have just kind of mellowed out a little bit. Before it was just like as intense as you could possibly get in every single way.
Well, I mean, these are the people that drank 3 martinis at lunch.
Yeah, they did
Not
everything
one.
Hardcore, right?
Yeah, you're just going to do something. You're going to do it hard.
Right.
So, in fact, we were talking about those people because the culture of work really changed since about the mid-19th century when people moved away. Not entirely. Obviously, we still had farmers and stuff, but mainstream America moved away from hard labor jobs into desk jobs, and they started to worry that the sedentary lifestyle wasn't good for them. In the mid-'70s is when corporate America started tuning in because Fortune magazine wrote an article that basically said, hey, all these CEOs and board members that we have are just a bunch of, and this is, of course, in the mid-'70s, they're a bunch of old, sort of overweight, white, fat cats, and they're all having heart attacks, and it's costing our firms and corporations about $700 million a year, and this is mid-'70s numbers.
Yeah.
And so it was them who started the health boom. It was sort of like corporate CEOs. I think in the 60s and 70s, Livia found some research that found that generally, like the people that started this whole thing were college educated, they had some money, and they were generally white people. Yeah,
that's who kicked off the boom. Today, the differential in race is pretty much erased. But there's still a gap in education where if you have college or some college or a bachelor's degree, you're about twice as likely to exercise on an average day as somebody who just has a degree from high school.
Really interesting.
It is interesting. Another thing that happened too, not just the health aspect, but in the 20th century, because of that increasing sedentariness, Americans became a lot more fixated on how you looked physically, especially weight, whether you were overweight or not. And there became a much greater emphasis on not being overweight. And that really dovetailed with the idea of taking care of your insides while also taking care of your outsides. And that really kind of provided the foundation for kind of funneling people into the exercise boom of the 60s and 70s. You could live longer, you could look better, so just go exercise. Let's all give it a try.
Yeah, for sure. And into the 80s is when you really saw a boom in women exercising more and more. The whole fitness movement was almost geared toward women at that point for a number of reasons. One was, women trying to become more empowered, women gaining power and empowerment. The feminist movement that said, all right, if you're gonna do that in the workplace, why not be strong in your personal life, physically strong?
Strong like bull.
Yeah, exactly. And so be strong in your work life, be strong in your physical life. Title IX, of course, really helped things out because all of a sudden girls' sports were getting more funding and more attention. And then, like you said, the standards for physical attractiveness changing was for men and women and everyone across the gender spectrum.
Exactly. So the first thing that really caught everybody's attention was jogging. That was the one that really laid the groundwork. And jogging grew out of legitimate running. Like most people peg a New Zealand Olympic track coach named Arthur Lydiard as the guy who, if he wasn't interested or involved in bringing jogging to the masses, he still was kind of like the inadvertent father of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because in the 60s, he came up with training techniques for marathon runners that people still use today. It's really simple, really basic, but it's really effective. It's things like on a Monday, you run 10 miles at half effort over hills and roads. And then Tuesday you do, flat 15-mile run or something like that. I don't think that's exactly it, but people use it today. And the fact that there was now a framework that anybody could just buy this book or buy this pamphlet and approach jogging, that really kind of helped usher people in. But again, bear in mind, this is a Olympic level track coach who's establishing this stuff. And this was people's first entree into jogging. So the earliest joggers were hardcore, like scary. I'm a little nervous about them. And we're talking about people who are running around in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. I think they like to be called runners, those types.
Sure.
They're like, you're a jogger, Chuck. Actually, I'm not even that.
Speed walker? Like Chris Paul?
I should do speed walking.
To me, Chuck, I'm sorry, speed walking is way harder than jogging.
Oh, do you mean like on your cardio or just your body? Or,
yeah, well, cardio, yes. Intensity.
Or to look cool? Okay.
Yeah, well put.
So in the mid-1960s, a guy you may have heard of named Bill Bowerman, he was a running coach from the University of Oregon, go Ducks, and co-founder of a little company called Nike. He published a pamphlet kind of based on stuff Arthur Lydiard had been talking about, and then eventually wrote this book that I remember seeing in houses of like friends of mine.
Really?
For sure. It was a very big book. It was called Jogging, even back then, a physical fitness program for all ages. He co-wrote it with a cardiologist named W.E. Harris, talked about all the health benefits of running, and it really caught on. It's really funny, though, like people still, like it caught on, but it was still sort of a new thing. So the New York Times wrote an article that demonstrated, and this was in April of 1968, that like when people were running, like cops occasionally, they had real stories, like a cop would stop and say like, why are you running? What are you running from? Or what did you do? Or people that were runners and joggers said, I like to run at night because people don't stare at me. I don't feel as weird. So it's just so funny to look back at, and this was in the late 60s that people jogging on the streets, but you were like, what's up with that person? Why are they running?
Right. And at night, they like to run in all black with a black watch cap and black mask covering their eyes.
Yes, very safe.
There was another guy who really brought jogging to the masses. His name was Jim Fixx. He wrote The Complete Book of Running, released in 1977. And if there was a proselytizer for running, if there ever was one, it was him.
Get your fix.
Yeah, and he ironically died while jogging. He ran himself to death. He had a massive heart attack while jogging. But he still I mean, it doesn't really undo what he did, which was, hey, everybody, let's go jog. And that's what Anchorman was referring to, was that
Right.
the jogging trend that Jim Fixx helped usher in the late 70s.
There was another Jim in the 70s, a man by the name of President Jim Carter. Wouldn't that be weird? That sounds so weird.
It does sound weird.
He's such a Jimmy.
He totally is. Jim, it seems like he'd have an overly strong handshake.
Right, Jim Carter.
Jim
Jimmy
Carter,
did not.
good to meet you.
Yeah.
What have
Jimmy
you done
Carter,
for me lately?
He high-fived. But this was at a time in the 70s when the president of the United States had influence on popular culture. Like, I don't feel like presidents really have that much anymore.
No.
It's dying fast, at least.
Sure.
And he was a jogger from the White House. This is the late 70s. He would jog sometimes 10, 12 miles at a time, really got into it. And the New York Times wrote about this, of course. And, if someone's in the White House jogging and running, then that normalizes it for a lot of America.
Yeah, I read an article about that. I don't know if it was the New York Times one or not, but it was in New York Times. It chronicled him going on this run. Like, he held like a fun run basically at Camp David, and he almost collapsed on one of the hills and had to be ushered off and taken to the hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was like running with dozens, scores, if not hundreds of other people on this fun run, and they were running with the president, and he had Secret Service guys running with him, keeping pace, but he had to leave the race that he helped organize because he just went too hard. That was how they used to do it.
Did they say over a bullhorn, now dropping out, a runner of 32, Jim Carter?
Shame. That's how they used to
was that Sean Connery?
do it. No, I didn't mean it, but sure, I'll take that. Yeah, that was Sean Connery shaming Jimmy Carter on that run in the late 70s.
It sounded like you doing Sean Connery saying same. That's how it heard in my head.
Shame.
Yes. Shame, Trebek. So speaking of the New York Times, and I guess we'll take a break after this, but in the late 90s, 97, they wrote an article kind of looking back on running and jogging. Mm-hmm. And they were keen to point out that, like, even into the 70s, though, it was still a bit of a subculture. Like you said, they were like running and jogging enthusiasts, but it wasn't like tons of mainstream Americans were running. It was still like, what are those people doing? Like, should I do that?
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Break time?
I think it is break time.
All right. We'll be right back with aerobics.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm a neuroscientist and an author at Stanford University, and I've spent my career exploring the 3-pound universe in our heads. On my new podcast, I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions so we can better understand our lives and our realities. Like, does time really run in slow motion when you're in a car accident? Or can we create new senses for humans? Or what does dreaming have to do with the rotation of the planet? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Ashley Litton was helping her husband set up a business Venmo account when she discovered a terrible secret.
I scrolled down, and that's when I saw a hidden folder, and I opened it. What the hell did I just see? I was scared that he was coming home.
What Ashley discovered that day was a secret so dark, she feared for her life.
She was like, oh my God, I got to get out of the house.
Okay, so you've got jogging that's on the scene. Mm-hmm. Then you have aerobics, too. This was the one that was like probably the most popular thing of the 80s, if you ask me. I think aerobics dominated the 80s, jogging the 70s. And aerobics was around a lot longer than just the 80s. It was one of those things where, some people who were kind of into exercising kind of developed it on their own separately, and then just took a little while to get more and more popular as word of mouth spread. But there's a guy named Kenneth Cooper who started it all again in the 60s. He was a U.S. Air Force surgeon, and he was like, that weightlifting, the calisthenics that the military uses for training, it's all well and good, but these guys are like dying on these runs and jogs and hikes. They've got no aerobic stamina. Exactly. Yeah. So he started looking into it, and he was like, I think we need to start using what we call now cardio, but back then it was aerobic exercise.
Yeah. He was a jogger. He said, I think aerobics is being sold short. So he wrote a book in 1968 called Aerobics. And he said, running and walking and biking is what people should be doing. And that was his idea of aerobics at the time, was just getting that heart rate up, sustaining it for an extended period of time. He had a pretty clever test where he could basically tell you in about 12 minutes what kind of, how good a shape you were in. But then what happened was really, really awesome. Like, I really love this section because my mom figures into this, which I'll get to as we go. But women in the United States said, you know what? They're talking about running and biking and walking, but what they're really talking about is getting your heart rate up for an extended period of time. So I'm going to make that my own. And there was one woman in particular very early on. There were some real trailblazers here. She was a dance teacher, also an Air Force wife, no coincidence, by the name of Jackie Sorensen. She read that book. She took that fitness test and found out she was in really good shape. And she was like, but wait a minute, I don't run. How can I be in this good a shape? She was like, I'm a dancer. I'm getting my heart rate up. And so she, in 1969, came up with a dance-based exercise class on the Air Force Base in Puerto Rico where they were stationed. And the Air Force said we should produce this as a TV show, which is really weird. And they did. It was called Aerobic Dancing. And eventually she published a book as well in the late 70s. But she, I think, was one of the first ones that really was like, you don't have to run. You can be in a room and do this as long as you get that heart rate up.
Exactly. And also, it just is much more engaging and fun and communal, too. Biking and jogging, those are very frequently solitary pursuits. Aerobics was a bunch of people getting together in a room and having fun together to, like, popular music, right?
Yeah, clapping and yelling and doing all that stuff.
Exactly, and encouraging one another. So this was really attractive to women at the time because this was, they were still coming out of this social expectation that they shouldn't really be exercising, and now they were saying, to heck with you guys, we're going to do this anyway. And it was almost like there was strength in numbers, but there was a social component to it as well.
Yeah.
There was another woman named Judy Shepard. She started out in the 60s as well. But she became the founder of Jazzercise.
That's right.
My mom used to jazzercise. I remember. She even had a poster of Judy Shepard doing different moves to go that came with her vinyl record, I should say. So my mom would do jazzercise at home. She went to jazzercise classes. She was into it for sure.
It was originally called Jazz and Dance for Fun and Fitness. Jazzercise is way more marketable. And this, to me, may be the fact of the podcast. It was Jazzercise, was a copywritten or whatever, an owned title. Right. I hope by Judy Shepard.
Yeah.
I didn't look that up, but it ended up being a franchise. And in 1984, Jazzercise was the second biggest franchise company in the United States behind Domino's Pizza.
That's really something. Because that was at the time when Domino's was like, we're going to get you your pizza in 30 minutes or less or it's free. So everybody was into Domino's at the time.
This is right before the Noid, I think, right?
Like 2 years before the Noid. I looked it up. So Judy Shepard created what's known as the boutique fitness franchise model, where it was a specific kind of exercise, usually some sort of branded exercise like Jazzercise, that you could go set up in a strip mall for a minimal initial output. And people would come flock to your Jazzercise studio. And you still see that today in certain places. Like Bar has a lot of like franchises, different kinds of franchises. Curves, which we'll talk about later, that's a franchise. But Judy Shepard started that with Jazzercise.
Yeah, very big deal. Then there was a woman named Gilda Marks married into the Marx Brothers family, had taken, growing up, apparently was a dancer and even worked out with weights, which was very unusual at the time.
Yes.
Because that would have been in, I guess, the 30s and 40s. And in 1960 or thereabouts, she was choreographing a charity show in Los Angeles, created an exercise routine so all the dancers could, get in better shape. And everyone loved it. Everyone's like, this is awesome. And she said, wait a minute, I'm onto something here. So she, in her backyard, started aerobics classes, then rented studios, and then eventually, and it became a very big, and as you'll see, sort of when something becomes like a big Hollywood thing and celebrities do it, it becomes a popular thing everywhere, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, yes, that's surprising. And it was called Body by Gilda. And it was not only a big deal because Body by Gilda was a big deal, but it was a big deal because she ended up having two clients by the name of Jane Fonda and Richard Simmons.
Yes, huge. So Gilda Marx essentially created the popularity of aerobics.
Mm-hmm.
Like jazzercise was there; it was very popular. The aerobic dancing, that was very popular too. But it was like celebrities like Jane Fonda and Richard Simmons, who became a celebrity just from being into exercise, that really, really increased it in popularity. And Jane Fonda just straight up ripped off Gilda Marx. She took a couple of her classes at a Body by Gilda in Century City, and the next year she set up her own studio. I think a couple years later, she published Jane Fonda's workout book, which became an extremely popular bestseller. It was #1 on the nonfiction list and stayed there for 6 months. By the way,
2 million books.
That's amazing. We're almost there. We're getting there with our book.
Yeah, right.
We're gnawing away at her record. But she also released a VHS tape that was wildly popular too. And that's why, people of a certain age today still associate Jane Fonda with exercise and aerobics. And then the people of a certain age, parents, associate her with funneling money to the Viet Cong.
Right. Still do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're still mad about it.
Oh, yeah, still mad. Here's another stat for you. The Jane Fonda workout tape was the first non-movie VHS tape to top the sales chart. And it was #1 as far as VHS sales go for 6 years. And the whole run of them, she ended up making follow-up tapes, but the whole collected Jane Fonda workout tape set has sold, between 82 and 95, sold 17 million tapes.
Wow.
That's numbers like that are amazing. She'd be, I don't even know what that translates to in record sales, but it's, what's the biggest? Platinum seller? Double platinum?
Platinum's 1 million.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's the best?
Platinum.
Or what's the highest?
I think they just keep going like triple platinum, quadruple platinum, that kind of thing.
So she was 17 platinum?
Yeah, that is extraordinarily impressive. And that really does put it into perspective because not a lot of records go platinum, especially not
She's
17
like Pink Floyd.
times over. Yeah, exactly. Although I will say she didn't have that much competition back then. The only other 2 movies on VHS were Beverly Hills Cop and The Empire Strikes Back.
Very nice.
So the other person that was a Body by Gilda graduate after just one class, it turned out.
Yeah, sort of.
Was one of the greatest people ever to run around planet Earth, Richard Simmons.
Agreed.
If you're not familiar with Richard Simmons, or if you just know him from Finding Richard Simmons podcast, even if you're just tangentially familiar with him from, living through the era where he was on TV everywhere all the time, go check out Richard Simmons' testimony before Congress.
Yeah.
C-SPAN has a clip of it when he went and testified before Congress, I think in the 90s, maybe early 90s, I think. And it's Richard Simmons in a suit and tie. So just that is worth going to see.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to see. But then he opens his mouth and it's just the same old Richard Simmons. And he gives this impassioned speech that will kind of make you tear up a little bit and give you chills. And then he also had some laughs in there. He's just great. Just a great person. And this guy, everyone at the time thought he was just totally weird. No one ever thought Richard Simmons was, he was never normal, right? But he was so himself that he just sucked people into his orbit, and he became a really, really popular star. I would guess one of the most famous people in the world for a brief period in the early 80s.
Absolutely. Like you said, he got kicked out of Body by Gilda and the one class that he went to by being Richard Simmons, basically. And then eventually founded a business. At first, it was an exercise studio / salad bar. I get what he's trying to do there. It was called Roughage and Anatomy Asylum. And then eventually he was like, you know what, let's drop the salad bar. Let's just make it a fitness center. Then obviously had the Richard Simmons show in 1980. Started putting out those VHS tapes in 83. And then in the late 80s, it's all leading to this moment. He puts out Sweatin' to the Oldies, which I believe to date has grossed over $200 million.
Amazing. It became the best-selling home fitness video ever. It knocked Jane Fonda off of the top of the heap.
Take that, Pink Floyd.
Yeah, and don't forget Deal-A-Meal. Remember, that was wildly successful, too.
Oh, that's right. That was him.
Yeah, it was like some color-coded cards, and you could put different color-coded cards together in your little Deal-A-Meal portfolio, and that would be your meal for the day. And if you followed the instructions, you would be able to lose weight. And he was really into losing weight because he had been very overweight as a child, and he was dedicated to making sure that other people didn't suffer the way that he suffered.
Yeah.
And he was very much dedicated. It was very sweet. He wasn't a phony, I guess.
No, he was true to himself. He wanted to have fun while he worked out. I love the guy. I know you do too. He's just one of the great humans.
Yeah, he was also on Letterman a lot too, like frequently.
That's
a great effect for sure. Because he had a sense of humor about himself. He wasn't like unaware of how people looked at him. He just didn't care.
And they both played their part. I think Letterman, he wasn't, honestly don't think Letterman was as genuinely freaked out and turned off by Richard Simmons in real life. I think it was all just a bit. And he's great. And, I didn't follow I didn't listen to Finding Richard Simmons, but I did sort of follow the story a little bit. And like my big takeaway was, and I know they may have meant well because they thought he was being held against his will, but I love that the end result was like, Richard Simmons is fine. Leave him alone. He doesn't want to be bothered anymore. Just let him live his life. Yeah. So winding down the talk of aerobics is when I want to talk about my mom for a minute, because Livia points out that, it was marketed to women as a way to like get in shape and lose weight, but also to empower yourselves. And to have some time with other women. And my mom was like, and sounds like your mom to a certain degree, but my mom specifically was sort of ideally, in all the wrong ways, situated to really get into this, because it was in the 80s. She was in a very unhappy marriage without getting into a lot of specifics. It was not, it was not a good scene in my house. And my parents didn't like each other much. My dad wasn't a supportive, good guy. And my mom dove into aerobics at the American Fitness Center like I'd never seen anyone dive into something before.
Didn't she become an instructor?
She became an instructor. She later became a spinning instructor into her 70s, I think, or at least late 60s. Yeah. And my dad was, and I didn't really realize this at the time, but this is all what was sort of just coming into my eyeballs and my ear holes as a kid. He was not supportive of it. He was threatened by it. He was I wish I could cuss. He was a real jerk about it. It's just interesting to look back at like, there were a lot of women like my mom, I think, in the 80s.
Yeah, I could see him like talking her down about it and her just being like, I can't hear you. I'm empowering myself right now.
Did your mom do this? Like, would she just sit around while the TV was on and do like leg lifts and stuff?
Yeah, she was into all sorts of stuff like that. Like just about any like not made for TV, as seen on TV, like exercise item we probably had. Remember the Thigh Master?
Oh, sure.
And that one thing, it was like kind of a weird metal cradle that helped you do sit-ups and crunches better. You just kind of rock back and forth on it. We had one of those. We had the mini trampolines. We had all that stuff.
I remember. It was called the something rocker, I think, actually. I do remember that.
Probably. It had to have been. If not, that was a real miss.
Yeah. But just to cherry on top this with my mom, I think not only was it empowering for her, but I think it was also, I think she was totally sticking it to my dad at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think my mom was trying to stick it to my dad, but she sure liked aerobics.
Yeah, I'm sure it was empowering for her too.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so second break?
Second break starting now.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm a neuroscientist and an author at Stanford University, and I've spent my career exploring the 3-pound universe in our heads. On my new podcast, I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions so we can better understand our lives and our realities. Like, does time really run in slow motion when you're in a car accident? Or can we create new senses for humans? Or what does dreaming have to do with the rotation of the planet? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Ashley Litton was helping her husband set up a business Venmo account when she discovered a terrible secret.
I scrolled down, and that's when I saw a hidden folder, and I opened it. What the hell did I just see? I was scared that he was coming home.
What Ashley discovered that day was a secret so dark, she feared for her life.
She was like, oh my God, I got to get out of the house. He's going to find out that I've seen this. He's going to come kill me.
Listen to Season 2 of Betrayal on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're looking for someone to help you unpack Queen Charlotte of Bridgerton's story, you're in the right place. It's me, Gabby Collins. Come with me, because on Queen Charlotte, the official podcast, we're stepping behind the scenes and the drawing boards of this team to experience the life breathed into the Bridgerton prequel. Listen to the leaps executive producer and series director Tom Verica took to capture the feeling that's put that lump in your throat. And you've got to catch creator Shonda Rhimes. She's dropping gems, diamonds, and mics. On this podcast, we're going beyond the basic line of questioning and getting to the heart of the show, all while appreciating the If you're looking for someone to help you unpack Queen Charlotte of Bridgerton's story, you're in the right place. It's me, Gabby Collins. Come with me, because on Queen Charlotte, the official podcast, we're stepping behind the scenes and the drawing boards of this team to experience the life breathed into the Bridgerton prequel. Listen to the leaps executive producer and series director Tom Verica took to capture the feeling that's put that lump in your throat. And you've got to catch creator Shonda Rhimes. She's dropping gems, diamonds, and mics. On this podcast, we're going beyond the basic line of questioning and getting to the heart of the show, all while appreciating the contributions of the show's creative teams and remarkable cast. Go inside each episode of Queen Charlotte of Bridgerton's story with the creatives, the cast, and creator Shonda Rhimes leading the way. Listen to Queen Charlotte, the official podcast, Thursdays on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, so we need to talk about gyms and gym culture, and it's just always been pretty popular and has never been more popular than it is now.
Yeah, the 19th century is when it first was introduced to the United States, I think.
Oh, is it like an ancient practice, probably?
Oh, yeah. It goes way back. Way back.
I think that's what I meant.
There's where my 100,000 came from that I was confused about curves. There's at least 100,000 yoga studios in the United States alone. And one thing that's cool about yoga in particular is there are some franchises, which is fine, but most yoga studios are independently owned. They're just somebody who loves yoga so much, they opened up their own studio, and you can come do yoga there.
Yeah. And that's kind of the same with our next, not fad, because it's been around for a while, but Pilates is kind of similar in that a lot of mom and pop Pilates places Like for instance, my the person I dated in New Jersey, she ended up, after I left and we broke up and stuff, she moved to Savannah, Georgia from New Jersey and started up her own Pilates studio.
Oh.
And this wasn't something that she did at all when I was there. So it's definitely something I think that like yoga, people can get into it and really get into it such that either I want to be an instructor or I want to open up my own business around it.
Sure. And Pilates was named after Joseph Pilates, I think you said?
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. So it is named after Joseph Pilates. He was a German circus performer, and his circus happened to be in the UK when World War I broke out. And they said, oh, you're German? We're going to lock you up for 4 years while the war goes on. So he and his whole troupe spent World War I locked up in the UK. And while he was there, he started developing a exercise regimen based on stretching that apparently saw cats chasing mice and birds around the prison. And so he came up with these exercises that imitated that. And he claimed that when the 1918 flu epidemic came to the island that he was imprisoned on, not one person who followed his exercise regimen got sick from it. Whether that's true or not, it's a pretty great story. And then one other great story about him is that he smoked 15 cigars and drank a liter of booze every day.
What a guy.
And he was like one of the gurus of fitness we're talking back in the teens and 1920s.
Yeah, that's amazing. I should probably plug Carol's studio.
Oh, yeah.
It's Momentum Pilates Studio in Savannah, and I haven't been in touch with her since then. So go to Momentum and tell her Chuck sent you, and I'm sure she'll say like, oh yeah, whatever happened to that guy?
Nice. Very nice. And the people who come will say, oh, let us tell you.
Yeah. She'd be like, a pod, what?
So bar's another one that's
Sure.
definitely worth mentioning because it incorporates elements of ballet, yoga, Pilates, and it's named after the bar basically the handrail that runs across the length of a wall that ballerinas frequently use. But it was created by a German ballerina in the 40s or 50s. No, the 50s. Who fled to England. She was her name was Lottie Burke, and she was a free love advocate. And so when she established bar and the bar exercises, she also coupled it with, not only is this going to make you feel great, it's going to help your sex life. And that was an overt message of taking bar from this through the 60s and the 70s.
I would have pronounced that, by the way, Lotta.
Well, unlucky for you, I said it first.
You give her a very Wisconsin-y
Lottie.
ring to it. Lottie, come here, Lottie.
Lottie Burke.
Boot camp workouts became very popular in the 90s. Obviously took on that sort of military style training where you didn't need a lot of stuff. You just needed to meet a bunch of strangers in a city park and have someone yell at you for an hour.
For sure.
What about Taibo?
Taibo was created by Billy Blanks, who was legit. He was the U.S. karate team captain for U.S. karate and the U.S. Olympic karate team. So he knew what he was doing, and he created Taibo, which kind of incorporated kickboxing, aerobics. If you've ever seen, if you were alive, I guess in probably the 90s, you saw the Billy Blanks Taibo infomercial. And he managed to sell a ton of tapes from that infomercial. It was a very successful infomercial. I'm not sure how much Taibo is done still today, but I looked it up to see if it was, is it legit? And it definitely is a legit workout.
Oh, sure. It's a butt kicker. I tried it once and I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But it was another example of one of those that really caught on in Hollywood and LA. And so
right.
It had a short-ish life. I'm sure people still do it, but the big Taibo craze was a few years.
For sure.
What about high-intensity interval training, HITT?
HIT.
I know this as Tabata because I was seeing a trainer for a while, and she put me through Tabata basically every time. And that was named after a sports scientist named Izumi Tabata, who in the mid-90s was working with Olympic speed skating coaches to create what was a form of high-intensity interval training.
Right, where you do something like push-ups or burpees or mountain climbers or something like that for maybe 20 seconds, rest for 10 seconds, and then you're immediately off into the next exercise for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And sometimes after 4 minutes, you might get a minute of rest. It depends on how long the Tabata workout is. Like a 12-minute one, you would not get any rest in between.
Yeah.
Certainly not a minute, I should say. But the point is, you're getting a high-intensity workout in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So you're doing like a 12 to 20-minute workout, and you're getting the same impact
Right.
that you would have gotten from, say, like a 30 to 40-minute workout of lower intensity, but still not low intensity. I mean, moderate intensity training.
Mm-hmm.
This is just super duper intensity, high intensity training. And
Yeah.
Tabata definitely established that.
Yeah, it's great if you're short on time. Obviously, I think our workouts were 30 minutes, and they were great. I enjoyed it. They were butt kickers, but I liked it.
Yeah, I should say, speaking of Tabata, a Japanese guy, Yumi reminded me that like exercise is really, really big in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that people have, or definitely had, loudspeakers in their house. And like in their local community or maybe even their region, every morning they would be like, "Good morning, it's time to do exercises." And everybody would do the same exercises in their house to the voice over the loudspeaker. It's called radio taiso.
Oh, interesting. And they also did like corporate calisthenics and stuff, right?
Yeah, they were just into like collective exercise for a long time.
That's great. And then the last couple we'll talk about are Zumba and CrossFit. Zumba, very popular, still popular. Apparently was created by accident in the mid-90s by Alberto Beto Perez. And he was a 16-year-old aerobics teacher in Colombia, apparently, as the story goes at least, forgot the usual music and said, "I'll just play the music that I have." And it turned into sort of a fun Latin dance exercise class thing.
Yeah, and just took off like a rocket. I think he was on the cover of Inc. magazine once. I mean, like it was just crazy how much it took off. And it's still huge. Zumba's still very much popular. A couple decades later. And then CrossFit is wildly popular too, not among everybody, but the people that it's popular with, it's wildly popular, so much so that it's commonly referred to as like a cult or something like that, because people love talking about CrossFit and proselytizing for it. But the point of CrossFit is kind of like what Arthur Jones, the Nautilus creator, was talking about, where you work out until you like just short of injuring yourself, essentially, where you feel like you want to throw up and like you can't do anymore. And it combines weightlifting, gymnastics, a bunch of different stuff, but it's a really, really intense workout that you really have to work your way up to. You shouldn't just jump into a CrossFit class. And if you go to a good CrossFit box, is what the studios are called, they're not going to just let you jump into it.
Right.
Because you can really hurt yourself.
Yeah, CrossFit doesn't interest me.
No, me either. We've done it before, and it's not fun.
Yeah. I'm digging yoga, though. Emily and I are doing it together. It's fun.
Yeah. And if you like CrossFit, hey, man, we're not yucking your yum. We're just talking about our own personal experience. So settle down.
No, I don't want to work out until I throw up. That's me.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a good one.
It was a good one. I hope we inspired you to do some exercise, because it's good for you. I don't care what anybody says. It's good for you. And even if it's not good for weight loss, which we found over the years, definitely not, it's good for mental health. I think we've said plenty of times. So just that alone makes it worthwhile.
Very worthwhile.
If you want to know more about exercising, then just start. It's really easy these days. And since I said that, it's time for listener mail.
I'm going to call this Coliseum follow-up. Hey, guys, quick note about the, how do we pronounce it? Hypogeum or hypogeum? I don't remember.
I think I called it a hypogeum.
Hypogeum? All right. Quick note about the hypogeum and the mock naval battles that were reportedly held inside the Coliseum. As you noted, the hypogeum was created after the amphitheater was built. The flooding of the floor of the Coliseum only happened in the first decade of the structure, and before the hypogeum was dug and created. Once the hypogeum was constructed, it was no longer possible to flood and drain the Colosseum.
That makes sense.
And that is from Dave Stemble.
Dave, that was great. To the point, authoritative, like a shake from Jim Carter.
That's right.
If you want to get in touch with us like
Dave.
Dave did. Dave's got a great handshake too, I'm sure. You can send us an email. Send it off to stuffpodcast@iheartradio.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions like, can we create new senses for humans? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Ashley Litton was helping her husband set up a business Venmo account when she discovered a terrible secret.
I saw a hidden folder, and I opened it. What the hell did I just see?
If you want to get in touch with us like
Dave.
Dave did, Dave's got a great handshake too, I'm sure. You can send us an email. Send it off to stuffpodcast@iheartradio.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions like, can we create new senses for humans? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Ashley Litton was helping her husband set up a business Venmo account when she discovered a terrible secret.
I saw a hidden folder, and I opened it. What the hell did I just see?